My older sister Dove, who is 29 years old, has always harbored a deep resentment towards me. This animosity became especially clear when she tried to seduce my fiancé right before my wedding, with the intention of breaking us up. Her actions were deceitful, and thankfully, we captured her attempts on camera. As a result of her manipulative behavior, our parents decided to disown her, which marked a significant turning point in our family dynamic. Dove has faced many challenges in her life. She is divorced and currently lives with our parents, as she has not been able to find a job since dropping out of college. Her decision to leave school was driven by her pursuit of a wealthy boyfriend, who ultimately divorced her when he realized her true personality. Growing up, my relationship with Dove was fraught with difficulties and tension. She was always seen as the more attractive and intelligent one, which led to her inflated ego. Our parents often praised her, which left me feeling invisible and inadequate. While everyone admired her beauty and accomplishments, I struggled with feelings of worthlessness. Dove seemed to revel in my insecurities, frequently making comments that belittled me and reinforced the idea that I was not likable. Those cruel remarks during our childhood lingered with me, profoundly impacting my self-esteem. Our parents favored Dove, which meant my feelings were often overlooked. As a result, I began to distance myself from my family during my childhood and teenage years. Whenever Dove had friends over while our parents were at work, they would invade my personal space. On one occasion, they sabotaged my school project, putting my grades at risk. When I considered approaching my mom about it, Dove resorted to blackmail. She threatened to share unflattering pictures of me with my classmates, which frightened me. As a 14-year-old, I felt powerless and chose to stay quiet, knowing my parents would likely dismiss my concerns anyway. Dove never took responsibility for her actions, and whenever I attempted to tell my parents, it felt pointless because they were blind to her faults. Dove's manipulative behavior extended to other incidents. One time, she used my phone to send inappropriate pictures of me to my friends, a direct response to me confiding in our dad about her. Another incident involved her spilling coffee on my prom dress and then acting like a victim, crying and claiming it was an accident. These experiences solidified my decision to stop confiding in my dad. As I navigated my relationship with Dove, I couldn't understand why she had such intense hatred towards me. Eventually, I realized that her behavior stemmed from her narcissistic personality, which made everything about her. Her relationships were tumultuous, often characterized by infidelity. It was painful to accept, but it was clear that she was also after money, as demonstrated by her choice in partners. Her behavior had been troubling during our teenage years, and as an adult, it only worsened. The lack of discipline from my parents played a significant role in her negative development. Despite the challenges at home, my situation improved after I finished school. I worked diligently to get into my dream college, and after some initial struggles, I achieved my goal and landed my dream job. It was there that I met Atlas during an office conference. He was intelligent, kind, and handsome. Our connection was instant, and within months, we were going on dates and embarking on various adventures together. Our relationship grew stronger as we traveled and created memories. Atlas had a close relationship with his siblings, and he introduced me to his family after just a few months of dating. However, I was hesitant to introduce him to my family. I had a strong instinct that Dove would try to sabotage my happiness, as she had always received the best things in life while I often felt left out. Now that I was doing better than her, especially in my relationship, I was sure she would be jealous. Eventually, I could no longer delay introducing Atlas to my family. It had been a year and a half since we started dating, and Atlas began to wonder about my reluctance. I finally told my dad about him, and he was thrilled to learn I had found someone worthy of my love. He invited us for dinner, an event filled with both excitement and anxiety, as I knew Dove could do anything to ruin my life. Despite Atlas being aware of my family issues, I took the time to explain the dynamics in detail. He was calm about it and assured me that he would handle the situation. Just a few days later, I received a surprising call from Dove. She had never called me before, and she seemed overly interested in Atlas, asking questions about him and when I would come home. Her sudden curiosity raised my suspicions, making me feel uneasy about her intentions. I have a feeling that Mom might have let Dove know about my relationship with Atlas. Things are getting pretty serious between us, and I can sense that Dove is trying to get closer to me for her own reasons. I find myself worrying about whether I should really take the risk of introducing Atlas to her. I know that her intentions are not genuine, and this makes me hesitant. I'm also considering a different approach to bring my parents over to introduce them to Atlas instead of putting myself in a situation where Dove is involved. I appreciate all the helpful comments and suggestions from those of you who reached out, asking for more details about Dove. So, here's more of the story. It's true that my parents, especially my dad, changed how they viewed my sister after her divorce. Dove has made some choices that led to her downfall. She had always excelled in school, but as soon as she started college, her main focus shifted to her looks and popularity. During this time, she met Jeremy, a wealthy guy, and decided to jump into a relationship with him. She completely neglected her studies and the goals she had set for herself. Meanwhile, I was preparing for my college entrance exams in my last year of high school. Dove would often put me down, insisting I would never get into my dream school. However, I managed to get accepted, and for the first time, my parents showed me how proud they were. This change in their attitude led to Dove feeling jealous when attention turned towards my achievement instead of hers. To celebrate my acceptance into college, my parents organized a small party with close family and friends. Dove wanted to draw attention away from me, so during the celebration, she announced her engagement to Jeremy right in front of everyone. Jeremy looked completely surprised, as if he had no idea she was going to do this. Despite the unexpected announcement, she succeeded in shifting the focus to herself. Guests were eager to hear more about Jeremy, especially since he was supposedly wealthy. Dove frequently flaunted her expensive gifts from him while cruelly saying I would never find a rich husband because of my looks. She constantly tried to make me feel inferior. I told her that I'm not after money like she is and that I can support myself independently. She could have the rich husband she wanted, because her behavior was selfish and cold-hearted. A week later, Dove and Jeremy got engaged. I had already moved on to college and didn't attend their engagement party. While I was in college, I had little to no communication with her. During family holidays, it felt like a relief because Dove was busy gallivanting around on vacations with Jeremy. After dating for about a year, they tied the knot in a lavish ceremony, with most of the expenses paid by Jeremy and my dad covering the rest as a courtesy, given that Dove didn't have a job. Unfortunately, their marriage didn't last long. After 3 years, they ended up getting divorced. I learned that the tension stemmed from Dove's unwillingness to have children, while Jeremy wanted to be a father. He assured me he never pressured her, but he was frustrated that she never brought up her feelings about starting a family during their marriage. He also shared concerns about her drinking and socializing habits, revealing that she often flirted with other men at bars. According to him, Dove married him primarily for his money, lacking any real emotional connection. I was baffled at how he could have missed her true motives for so long. Jeremy even showed me videos of Dove out with other guys who were inappropriately touching her, and she didn't seem to stop them. It was good for him to be free from that relationship. Surprisingly, my parents took Dove's side, placing all the blame on Jeremy for not forcing her into motherhood and refusing to acknowledge her mistakes. After the divorce, Dove moved back in with my parents because she had no job and had dropped out of college when she married Jeremy. Now, 5 years later, she finds herself with no degree and no work experience. She pretended to be heartbroken over the divorce, but I could see she was actually relishing the newfound freedom. Within a month, she was back to hitting the clubs and dating multiple people. Her life seemed to revolve around going out and casual relationships, and her Instagram stories were enough proof of what she was really doing. Meanwhile, after 2 years of hard work in my career, I finally landed my dream job, earning a good salary. My parents were thrilled for me, showing me the support I had always hoped for. My parents were overjoyed when I returned home after receiving a job offer. My dad beamed with pride, making me feel incredibly happy. We were enjoying a pleasant dinner together when my sister Dove walked in, appearing somewhat tipsy. Upon seeing her, my dad expressed his disappointment and remarked that Dove should have focused on her education like I did instead of ruining her life by getting involved with someone named Jeremy. He contrasted my achievements and salary with Dove's current situation, highlighting that she was still financially dependent on our parents. My mom stepped in, asking Dad not to make such harsh remarks. This prompted a strong reaction from Dove, who stormed out of the room and slammed the door. At that moment, Dad recognized how spoiled Dove had become. He urged my mom to talk some sense into her, insisting that she needed to take her life more seriously and work towards independence instead of relying on them. I couldn't help but feel that this might have struck a chord with Dove. Later, she came into my room and told me that I could never be like her, no matter how much money I made. She even body-shamed me, pointing out my belly fat and chubby cheeks. Her comments used to break my heart when I was a teenager, but now they rolled off my back. I laughed and told her that I really didn't want to be like her and that she needed to fix her attitude. In response, Dove unleashed her anger and demanded that I leave the house. I stood my ground and reminded her that it was my parents' house too, and she had no right to treat me that way. The next day, as I was packing for my return, I discovered that 2 of my dresses had been badly torn, with clear scissor cuts. I took them downstairs to show my parents, revealing Dove's childish act. My dad called for Dove in a fit of anger, while my mom tried to defend her, claiming that Dove was in shock and unaware of her actions. Dad warned Mom to stay out of it, then confronted Dove directly. He told her that she needed to get her life together and that he could no longer support her or tolerate her narcissistic behavior. This did not sit well with Dove, and her resentment towards me grew. Since that incident, I have faced Dove's intense wrath. While I remained unaffected by her hatred, it became increasingly hard to ignore when she tried to make inappropriate advances toward my boyfriend. After a lot of thought and discussions with him, I decided to bring Atlas to visit my parents. I realized there was no point in hiding him from Dove, as she would eventually find out about him. My friends advised me that it was better to test the relationship now rather than risk losing him later. They pointed out that Dove would succeed in her manipulative intentions only if Atlas showed interest in her. With some apprehension, I arrived at my parents' house with Atlas. Upon our arrival, Dove wasted no time in trying to throw herself at him. While Atlas was greeting my parents, Dove abruptly stepped in and hugged him. I was puzzled by her belief that Atlas would be attracted to her. She had noticeably changed her appearance, dyeing her hair black and dressing up as if she were preparing for a date. Throughout the evening, it was clear to everyone at the dinner table that she was trying to monopolize his attention. When I requested that she move so I could sit next to Atlas, she shot me an annoyed glance but complied. During dinner, Dove kept asking Atlas about his interests. Whenever he mentioned liking something, she would claim to like it too, even if it were not true. She attempted to convince everyone that they were compatible and frequently winked at me, as though to say not to take her actions seriously, but it was clear to me what her intentions were. Atlas appeared uncomfortable and eventually redirected the conversation toward my parents. Her efforts to draw him in were painfully obvious. After dinner, I went to take a shower, leaving Atlas alone momentarily. During that time, Dove entered the room and asked him to call her phone number because she claimed to have lost her phone. This was clearly just a ploy to obtain his number. Later, Atlas informed me that while I was otherwise occupied, Dove attempted to gain his sympathy by sharing her sob story about her divorce and the mental struggles she faced. Surprisingly, my mom also joined in her complaints about Jeremy. Eventually, Atlas asked if I wanted to go for a walk, suggesting he would like a tour of the neighborhood. Before I could respond, Dove jumped up and said she would join us. Atlas gave her a look of confusion, clearly taken aback by her sudden involvement. He expressed a desire to have some alone time with me, and her face turned red with embarrassment. She quickly retreated into her room, leaving me with a mix of feelings. It had only been a few days since my visit, and I couldn't shake the anticipation that Dove would start using tricks to attract Atlas. I felt worried about this but also had faith in my fiancé and wanted to see how he dealt with her attempts. An update on my life: I'm engaged. Atlas proposed to me last month while we were on a trip. He got down on one knee with a ring, and I was overjoyed, unable to stop smiling and talking about it. However, after my visit to my parents, Dove began her manipulative tactics again. She texted Atlas to check on him. Since Atlas loves cats, Dove started flooding his phone with cute cat videos, even though she never cared for cats before. Once she learned how much Atlas adored them, she got a cat for herself and began sending him videos of it, hoping to catch his attention. In the beginning, Atlas kept me updated about Dove's persistent messages and her faux concern for him, even asking about his work. She acted as if she truly cared about him. But eventually, he stopped mentioning her messages, leading me to believe she had finally given up and moved on. We also shifted our focus away from her because we had much more important things to deal with in our lives, including a busy work schedule. Then one day, while I was scrolling through social media, I discovered that Dove had added Atlas as a friend. I felt uneasy as I saw her liking and commenting on every single one of his posts, using those cute heart emojis. She even went as far back as liking pictures and videos from 7 to 10 years ago. This behavior raised red flags for me, so I decided to check Atlas's phone. I found Dove's texts were still coming through, but they were mostly unread and quite strange. It was clear she was trying hard to get his attention. The call log showed missed calls from her, including one that came in around 3 a.m. This made me anxious, so I confronted Atlas directly. When I asked him why he hadn't mentioned Dove's messages, he seemed nervous. He claimed he was ignoring her and thought it was best not to bring her up. I pressed him about the late-night calls, and he remained calm. Finally, he explained that one night, Dove had called him in distress. Thinking something was wrong, he answered, but she started talking about traumatic experiences related to someone named Jeremy and said she needed someone to listen. Atlas advised her to reach out to her parents instead of calling him late at night. He also mentioned that he told her to inform me about her calls. Hearing this made me upset. I told him that hiding this information was not okay and it could lead to me losing trust in him. He assured me that he wouldn't fall for her tricks and that I had nothing to worry about. Still, I had read countless stories of situations just like this, where men had succumbed to such manipulations. The last thing I wanted was to blindly trust him and end up looking foolish. I made it clear that the next time Dove called, he needed to hand the phone over to me. I wanted to catch her in the act of her scheming. One night, her call came through and woke me up. I answered the phone, and as soon as she heard my voice, she fell silent and quickly said it was a mistake before hanging up. The following day, I attempted to call her multiple times to issue a warning, but she ignored my calls. I then sent a text from Atlas's phone, making it clear that it was me and that she shouldn't contact him during odd hours. I told her that if she had an emergency, she needed to reach out to me instead, and after that, she stopped messaging him. I finally felt relief, thinking she was out of our lives. After Atlas proposed to me, I sent a picture of the ring to my dad. Dove must have seen it through family channels and decided to start her stalking again. She resumed texting Atlas and sending him silly videos, which was incredibly frustrating. When Atlas finally told me about her behavior again, I called her and let my anger pour out. I demanded she stop trying to manipulate him and suggested she find something better to do with her life. Throughout my rant, Dove stayed quiet for the most part, but little did I know that this would not be the end of her attempts. Little did I realize that my sister would not simply back off after our confrontation. The moment I hung up the phone, I received an immediate call from my mom, her voice filled with anger and disappointment. She yelled at me for supposedly insulting my sister, Dove. Apparently, Dove had been telling Mom that I accused her of trying to steal my fiancé. Mom's response was fierce. She said my harsh words had caused Dove to have panic attacks and urged me to show more consideration toward my sister, who had been battling depression for years. She claimed Dove was still reeling from her difficult divorce. It struck me as ironic and strange because, in reality, Dove had never shown signs of being upset about her divorce. After that intense phone call, I reached out to my dad and expressed my feelings of frustration. I told him that if they continued to ignore Dove's manipulative behavior, I would have to distance myself from them. I was tired of being used as a pawn in Dove's ongoing drama. I felt that I could not sit back and remain silent about her actions anymore. I decided I was done with her games. Dove had always made my life challenging, but I never expected her to cross such a severe line. I could handle her bullying, her constant body shaming, and her cruel jokes about me. But the idea that she might try to seduce my fiancé before our wedding was something I found hard to accept. As we were making wedding plans, I distanced myself from my mom after our last argument. Despite this, she reached out and apologized for her outburst, explaining that she acted out of fear for Dove's well-being. One of my cousins informed me that Dove had been crying over my happiness. She was telling everyone that I was accusing her of stealing my fiancé and that I didn't deserve any of my good fortune. According to Dove, she believed that since she was the more attractive sister, she should have everything good come her way, including my fiancé, Atlas. I told my mom what my cousin had said, and for a moment, she fell silent. Then she advised me to forget about Dove's drama and concentrate on planning my wedding and enjoying my life. As the wedding day approached, Dove remained surprisingly quiet. At least she didn't intrude on our preparations. On the day of the wedding, while we were at the venue getting ready, I received an unexpected call from Atlas's best friend. He asked me to come to Atlas's room along with my parents. I jokingly teased him about the old wedding tradition that says a groom shouldn't see the bride before the ceremony, but he insisted it was serious and needed urgent attention. My heart raced, and I hurried to join my parents in Atlas's room. When we entered, I found Atlas lying there, shirtless, drifting in and out of consciousness. His groomsmen were explaining what had happened. They told me that while Atlas was preparing, Dove had come into his room with a drink. Even though he had refused it, Dove insisted he take a sip. He quickly realized that the drink had been spiked. Atlas excused himself to go to the washroom, where he was able to call his friend to explain the situation. His friend rushed over, only to arrive in time to see Atlas partially passed out. Atlas's friend had a spare key to the room and entered cautiously, switching on his camera in case he needed evidence. He overheard Atlas shouting at Dove to leave him alone while she was sitting on him and undressing herself. My heart sank as I learned that this despicable act was being recorded. When Dove noticed Atlas's friend, she immediately attempted to cover up and claimed they were making out. She believed she could escape the situation unscathed, not realizing that she had already been caught on camera. As she left the room, she smirked at Atlas's friend, requesting him to keep quiet about what he had just witnessed. When I arrived at the scene, Atlas was still lying on the floor, partially unconscious. The effects of the drink were evident. he was extremely dizzy and suffering from a severe headache just from a few sips. The drink, which had solid particles settling at the bottom, remained untouched on the floor. My parents were in shock. They couldn't fathom that Dove would stoop so low. In disbelief, my mom called Dove and instructed her to come to Atlas's room. When Dove arrived, her lipstick was smudged, and she put on a facade of innocence. She claimed, "I know you guys are upset, but it was mutual. Atlas loves me, and he has been making advances on me since we met. Today, he convinced me to have a one-time hookup." The gravity of her words weighed heavily on all of us as we stood there, grappling with the betrayal just moments before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. He managed to persuade me to agree to one brief encounter before the wedding. It was supposed to be just a harmless moment, but then Mom reacted strongly. She slapped her hard and told her that we all knew the tricks she was trying to pull. Mom made it clear that we had evidence of her behavior, as it had been caught on camera. The shock on her face was unmistakable when my parents decided to kick her out of the wedding venue, ensuring she wouldn't cause any more problems. We had instructed security to prevent her from returning, knowing full well her intentions were to create a spectacle that would force me to reconsider the wedding. Dove was determined to make sure everyone saw her making out with Atlas, hoping that it would lead me to cancel our plans. Meanwhile, my dad took action by calling the doctor, who confirmed the alarming news that Atlas had been given a drink that had been spiked. This really affected him, putting him in a bad place mentally and physically. Atlas's family was understandably furious, with his parents and siblings ready to confront Dove directly in their anger. My parents felt the need to step in and apologize to Atlas's family to help ease the situation. The wedding had to be postponed until Atlas was well enough to participate, which involved him dealing with several bouts of vomiting. The story spread quickly among our guests, and for days we were the topic of hot gossip. When Atlas finally recovered, my dad walked me down the aisle. I felt a wave of joy to see Atlas standing there as my husband, but I couldn't shake the stress of the chaos that had just unfolded. In an emotional moment during our vows, Atlas added an extra promise. He vowed to protect our relationship against anyone who wished to see us apart. After we returned from our honeymoon, my parents came to visit us. They took the time to apologize to Atlas for all the trouble Dove had caused. My dad assured us that Dove would no longer be part of our lives. He had taken decisive action, kicking her out of the house and telling her she needed to learn to live on her own. Despite this resolution, I still find it hard to move past the event. It felt like our wedding was on the verge of being cancelled. If it hadn't been for that recording made by Atlas's friend, I would have struggled to believe that he had nothing to do with Dove's actions. The whole experience was overwhelming, and the impact of those moments still lingers in my mind.